Hitler's death. Suicide or the greatest escape in history? On April 30th, 1945, as the city of Berlin burned under relentless Soviet attack, Adolf Hitler, the dictator responsible for World War II and the deaths of millions, disappeared from the world. Within hours, word spread that he was dead. The official story claimed that he had taken his own life inside an underground bunker beneath the ruins of his capital. His body, along with that of his newly married wife, Eva Braun, was reportedly burned to prevent it from being captured. But almost immediately, questions began to rise. There was no public body, no widely released photographs, no funeral. The Soviet Union, which captured Berlin, gave conflicting statements. Over the decades, rumors spread across Europe and South America. Some believed Hitler had escaped. Others claimed he had been secretly protected. Some even insisted he lived for years under a false identity. So what really happened in Hitler's final days? Did he die in the bunker, as history books say? Or was his death staged in one of the greatest deceptions of the 20th century? To understand the mystery, we must return to the final weeks of Nazi Germany. By April 1945, the Third Reich was collapsing. Allied forces had crossed the Rhine from the west, while the Soviet Red Army advanced from the east. German cities were reduced to rubble. Supply lines were broken. Soldiers were surrendering in massive numbers. The once powerful empire that Hitler had promised would last 1,000 years was disintegrating in just 12. Inside Berlin, chaos ruled. Civilians fled through destroyed streets. Government buildings were abandoned. Communication systems failed. Yet beneath the Reich Chancellery, in a reinforced underground bunker known as the Führer Bunker, Adolf Hitler remained. The bunker was not a luxurious hideout. It was a claustrophobic network of rooms built to withstand bombing. The air was heavy, the lighting artificial. The sound of artillery thundered constantly above. Reports from those inside describe a tense, hopeless atmosphere. Hitler, once known for fiery speeches and dramatic appearances, was physically deteriorating. Witnesses described him as pale, shaking, and exhausted. His left hand reportedly trembled uncontrollably, possibly from Parkinson's disease. Despite the reality outside, Hitler continued issuing military orders. He believed imaginary armies would counterattack and push back the Soviets. His generals knew these forces no longer existed. Yet few dared to confront him directly. As Soviet troops encircled Berlin, it became clear that capture was inevitable. Hitler had long declared that he would never allow himself to be taken alive. He feared humiliation similar to what had happened to Italian dictator Benito Mussolini, who had been captured and executed by partisans just days earlier. Mussolini's body had been publicly displayed, a warning to all dictators. Hitler reportedly saw photographs of Mussolini's fate. It strengthened his resolve. On April 29, 1945, in the early hours of the morning, Hitler married Eva Braun in a small civil ceremony inside the bunker. Eva Braun had been his companion for years, but had rarely appeared publicly. She chose to stay with him in Berlin, despite having opportunities to escape. Shortly after the wedding, Hitler dictated his political and personal testaments. In them, he blamed the war on others, expressed no remorse for the devastation, and appointed successors to lead what remained of the Nazi state. The next day, April 30th, 1945, the end came. According to witnesses inside the bunker, Hitler and Eva Braun retreated to his private study in the afternoon. Around 3:30 p.m., a gunshot was heard. Staff members later entered the room. They reported that Hitler was sitting on a sofa, a pistol at his side, with a gunshot wound to his head. Eva Braun was beside him, having taken cyanide poison, following Hitler's prior instructions. The bodies were carried up to the Reich Chancellery Garden. In the middle of intense shelling, aides poured gasoline over the corpses and set them on fire. The intention was clear: to prevent the Soviets from capturing and displaying the bodies. Soon after, Soviet troops overran the area. Here is where the mystery deepens. The Soviet Union quickly secured the bunker and surrounding grounds. They conducted secret investigations and reportedly recovered partially burned remains. However, Soviet authorities did not immediately announce clear findings. Instead, they released confusing and contradictory statements. At times, they suggested Hitler might have escaped. Soviet leader Joseph Stalin even told Allied leaders that Hitler could still be alive. Why would Stalin suggest such a possibility? Some historians believe it was a strategic move. The early Cold War was beginning. Suspicion between former allies was growing. Suggesting Hitler had escaped could create distrust among the Western powers or imply they were hiding something. Meanwhile, Soviet forensic teams examined remains they believed belonged to Hitler and Eva Braun. Dental records played a crucial role. Hitler's dentist and dental assistants were captured and interrogated. They provided detailed descriptions of Hitler's dental work, including unique bridge structures and metal fittings. According to Soviet reports, the jawbone fragments recovered matched these descriptions precisely. For many historians, this dental evidence became the strongest proof that Hitler died in the bunker. However, much of the Soviet documentation remained classified for decades. Limited transparency fueled suspicion. Without photographs or publicly accessible forensic reports, rumors spread quickly. In the years after the war, stories began to circulate about Nazi officials fleeing to South America. It is true that many high-ranking Nazis escaped Europe through secret routes often referred to as rat lines. Countries like Argentina and Paraguay became known as safe havens for former Nazis. Adolf Eichmann, one of the architects of the Holocaust, was famously captured in Argentina in 1960. This confirmed that major war criminals had indeed found refuge there. If Eichmann could escape, people wondered, why not Hitler? Reports surfaced claiming Hitler had been seen in Argentina. Some alleged he lived in remote regions, protected by sympathizers. Others claimed submarines had transported him across the Atlantic. Books and documentaries repeated these theories, often citing mysterious witnesses or unverified intelligence files. In the United States, declassified FBI documents revealed that the agency had received numerous tips claiming Hitler was alive. However, most of these reports were based on rumors or unreliable sources. Investigations did not confirm any credible evidence of his survival. In 2009, the controversy resurfaced dramatically. A fragment of skull kept in Russian archives, long claimed to belong to Hitler, was subjected to DNA testing by researchers. The results suggested the skull fragment belonged to a woman under 40 years old. Since Hitler was 56 at the time of his death, this finding raised questions. Critics argued that if the skull was not Hitler's, perhaps the entire story was flawed. However, historians pointed out that the skull fragment was only one piece of evidence. The crucial jawbone fragments, which had matched Hitler's dental records, were separate and remained strong evidence. Later examinations of those jaw fragments by international researchers supported the conclusion that they belonged to Hitler. In 2018, a French team granted access to the remains concluded that the teeth were consistent with Hitler's known dental records and showed no signs of having survived long after 1945. So why do conspiracy theories continue? Part of the reason lies in the nature of the end itself. Hitler's body was burned and partially destroyed. There was no public display. No clear photographic documentation released immediately. The Soviet Union's secrecy and propaganda created a vacuum of reliable information. In that vacuum, speculation thrived. There is also a psychological factor. For many, the idea that one of history's most infamous figures could simply end his life in a bunker feels anticlimactic. After causing unimaginable destruction, some expect a dramatic final confrontation or capture. Suicide seems too simple. Escape stories provide a more dramatic narrative. Additionally, conspiracy theories often grow when events involve powerful governments, classified documents, and limited transparency. The Cold War environment encouraged mistrust. Western audiences often doubted Soviet claims, while Soviet narratives sometimes contradicted themselves. Yet when modern historians evaluate all available evidence, eyewitness accounts, dental records, forensic analysis, and captured documents, the overwhelming conclusion is that Adolf Hitler died on April 30th, 1945, by suicide in the Führer bunker. This conclusion does not glorify him. It does not excuse his crimes. It simply reflects the most credible interpretation of historical evidence. Adolf Hitler's regime was responsible for the Holocaust, in which 6 million Jews were murdered, along with millions of other victims, including Romani people, disabled individuals, political opponents, and prisoners of war. His aggressive expansionism triggered a global conflict that resulted in over 70 million deaths. Cities were destroyed, families shattered, entire communities erased. His final act, taking his own life, did not erase those crimes. It did not bring justice. Instead, it denied the world a public trial that could have exposed even more details of the Nazi system. Other leaders, such as Hermann Göring and Rudolf Hess, faced trials in Nuremberg. But Hitler avoided that fate. In the end, the mystery of his death reveals more about human psychology and politics than about the event itself. The evidence strongly supports suicide. The escape theories, while dramatic, lack solid proof. History sometimes leaves space for doubt, especially when documentation is incomplete or controlled by governments. But responsible historical analysis depends on weighing evidence carefully. In this case, dental records, eyewitness testimony, and multiple independent investigations align around one conclusion. Adolf Hitler did not escape to South America. He did not live secretly into old age. He died in a bunker as his empire collapsed around him. What remains is not a mystery of survival, but a lesson about power, propaganda, and the dangers of extremism. His rise shows how economic crisis, political instability, and effective propaganda can elevate a radical leader. His fall demonstrates how regimes built on hatred and aggression ultimately destroy themselves. The story of Hitler's death will likely continue to inspire books and documentaries. Questions will resurface. New theories will appear. But unless credible new evidence emerges, the historical consensus stands firm. On April 30th, 1945, in a dark underground bunker beneath a ruined Berlin, Adolf Hitler ended his own life as Soviet forces closed in. His body was burned. His regime collapsed. And one of the darkest chapters in human history came to an end. The real story is not about escape. It is about consequences. It is about how destructive ideologies can devastate the world. And it is about the importance of remembering history accurately, so that such devastation is never repeated.